So let's carry on with something else now that we have done a lot of masking work. There is one thing that I was already showing in the tutorial for the droid, and that is that I want to create a new fill layer here, and I'm gonna click on the base color tab and then search for ambient, which will pop up our ambient occlusion map, and I'm going to select it. And now we can take this here into multiply, and essentially that will just make it all a bit more contrasty. I want to disable all the layers aside from color. I only want to have color information on that. So we have it in multiply, and now we add another fill layer where we are then filtering for our curvature map. So let's also add that. And this one we don't want to have on multiply. We're going to put it to overlay. And most importantly, we want to dial it down quite a bit. 25 to 30 is usually the region that you should play with. And on this one, we want to do the same thing where we disable it for everything aside from the color information. So that is basically how we can get some extra contrast here on the sword. And now I want to search in our Smart Material tab here for leather. Let's start to work on our leather here. And I'm going to start by using the Smart Material that says Leather Fine Aged. And if you open that up, you will see there's a whole bunch of different materials already in there, or fill layers, I should say. And we want to go over here to the leather color, and I'm gonna adjust the roughness to 0.52. I have the edge damages disabled, by the way, as you can see on top. This one I don't want to have activated. The leather pattern itself, let's see about this one. Let's increase it quite significantly where it says scale under UV transformations. Otherwise it looks ugly. And our leather color, let's go over here to where we have the color. And I'm gonna change it here to a bit more of an orange and bright tone. So these are the values I'm working with here. I'm gonna have 0.65 for the red, 0.38 for the green, and 0.145 for the blue. So these values here will make it look quite a bit bright, but I find that makes for a nice contrast here. And we are also not done yet. So still here on that layer where it says leather color, let's do some scaling, and I want to punch in 6 here. I think that looks good here with these details. And let me just disable the leather pattern so that we only take a look here at the other one. But with our leather pattern, we get some extra contrast here, some extra details, and I'm actually gonna make that here a little smaller on the scaling. I'm gonna put it to 20. And by smaller, I only mean the number. Making the tiling number smaller actually means that the tiling that you see is bigger as before. So it's actually the opposite. So I'm gonna add a new fill layer, put the roughness all the way to the right side. And let's put in here some tone that is more of a darker brown. You can see exactly the numbers there on my end if you want to have one-to-one the same. And now with this layer here, I'm gonna add a black mask. And then let's scale up our brush. And first of all, let's make it soft. And then also change the opacity of it so that it's not full opacity. Let me just undo that here. I'm actually gonna add a white mask, and then here with our black brush we can basically mask it like that here. And essentially right now it's a little exaggerated. We can still change it later, but I want this darker tone to be more obvious here where we have these borders, just so that it looks more like it's been worn out there. It's been pressed against these elements there, and that this kind of reflects in a different color. So once again here I'm changing the opacity of the brush. Actually don't want that to be too much here of this color information. And then we have a nice detail here. We can also reverse the mask and add to it. Like for example here we were taking a bit too much away from it. And then here let me also add a few of these strokes here in the center. And you can always toggle the display here. If you press C, it will cycle through the different views, such as color, roughness, metalness. So let's press C, and here we have the base color, and you can see the difference if you toggle our layer, the one that we just created here, this one, and we don't have any roughness on that as well here. So it's interesting to see how the roughness behaves on it. And what I want to do here is basically taking a black mask and then just add a little bit more information here to it. And in general, I want to bring that roughness up a bit so that it's not entirely matte. So let's take a look at it again here by pressing C. And you get out of this view if you press M. Sorry, I should have mentioned that before. Pressing M will put you back here to our original material view. And now here with our white brush, I'm just gonna add a bit more of this dark tone that we have on our current layer. And that just makes the whole leather look more interesting than just having one color. Essentially, we're working with two colors here, the dark tone and the bright tone. And let me just undo what I was just doing here. What I want to do is go over here to our alphas, and I want to select some grunge looking brush here. Let's see which one we can use for that. For example, this one here, that already comes with some grunge information on it, so we can then also use that technically as an alpha. I'm just gonna change the opacity on it here, and that way we don't just paint with like this round alpha, we have a bit of this contrast already in it. And let's just make it a bit smaller here and add some of this information here where we have these individual leather stripes. And yeah, I think this looks pretty nice to have this contrast here with these colors. That way we give the whole thing a bit more depth. And let's see where else we can do this. Maybe also here on these edges, a bit here on the sides. And yeah, like I was just saying, that just helps to give it more contrast, a bit more interest. And we don't just have this one thing here, this one color. So yeah, there are quite a few steps to consider when creating leather. And I usually don't like the materials that come out of the box. Let's change our texture set settings to 4K. And here you can really see the details that are in this leather information. this leather pattern here. Let me just toggle that. It takes a moment to load because 4K is very slow. That's why we are usually working in 2K. But you can see the difference that this normal map layer makes. I think this is actually still too strong. So I'm going to select this leather layer, switch over to our height information here. And then here on that slider, I'm going to put it to something like 2. So now we still have it, but very decent. And overall, I think this looks better than having it so strong. So now with this layer selected, let's press Ctrl D to make a copy of it. And then here where it says height, let's click on it and let's search for leather. And I want to add the second one that pops up, grunge leather damaged. And basically what that does is that it adds some extra grungy normal map bits here on it. Let's just take a look at it and you will see we have these nice spots there now to kind of change our overall look of it and give it a bit more of a contrast here. You can also see these dots if we toggle the different views here, and you can see it also here in the normal map view. Now we got some more interesting details here on our leather. So yeah, I'm making quite the art out of this leather here. I'm gonna actually increase this here to a free on the height information on our copied version. And here on the small version, let's try how it looks like with a 1. And I think this looks pretty good. Let's toggle the big parts. Let's just uncheck both. And you can definitely see how this height information here plays a crucial role in our leather look. So I'm gonna increase the contrast to 1 and gonna have the balance here at 0.79 to make it stand out a bit more. And due to a video editing error, I forgot to show how I put it back to base color here. So make sure it's back to base color. And now what I want to do is create a new fill layer here on top of everything. And this is going to be basically the dirt. So for now, I'm just going to add a black mask to it. And then I want to add a generator to that mask and choose the dirt generator here. And let's see here with our default settings what it looks like. And also let's go over here to our brush tab. And let's just get out of this grunge view. So I'm gonna have our basic hard brush selected. And now let's select the mask here of this new layer, or actually switch over here to our dirt generator. And then I also want to get out of this 4K view. Let's put it back to 2K under our texture set settings. And that way we are basically back to normal. Let's go over here to the material, the one that we just created new. So far it's still white, but since that is supposed to be dirt, I'm gonna put it here to pretty much all the way down so that it's all black. And that way, if we then switch over here to our color view, we see how this really fills up there the edges where we would expect it to have the dirt kind of accumulating. So once again, that's gonna add some nice extra detail here to our leather. And I wanna go over here to our roughness and actually put that all the way down here. Let's see what that looks like here on the other one as well. And I think we can leave it like that. This concludes our leather for now. Let's concentrate on our emissive. I want to scroll up here to that folder that we created earlier, and I want to right click the mask, and actually I want to remove it. Let's say remove mask. And now let's give this layer here a name, glow and small dots. I'm gonna add a black mask here to this material. Let's go into the material properties. And first of all, under texture settings, let's click on that plus button here and add emissive here to our channels. So far we didn't even have that. So now let's enable the emissive channel here on this material. And then under emissive, we define our color here. This color here is the regular color in the albedo, but we don't even need that. We can disable this entirely because we define the emissive color through the emissive channel. And usually this is also defined then in a game engine. So if you just put it to white, you can still change it in the editor. So that's why we're just gonna have it here as height information and as emissive. And I'm gonna put the emissive color to a red just so that we better see what we're up to here. So let me just get our brush here down to a smaller size. And let's paint some details in here. These are also accents. I don't want to add emissive all over the place. It shouldn't look like a Christmas tree, if you know what I mean. But I'm definitely gonna add some more of that emissive here. So far we're only doing the dots, some smaller points pretty much. Let's also bring the height down, -0.2, to give it some extra depth. And then later, once we place all these dots, we're gonna also draw in some lines here to support all that. Some emissive lines. I actually want to go back here to the gold and delete this. And then instead, let's also add this height information here on top, where we have that sphere. And let's make it a bit of a smaller brush to also add some of it here at the back. And then let's just scroll here over the sword from left to right and see where else we can add it, such as here. And here on our side view, let's also add it. And thanks to that height information that we gave the material, it will merge into our normal map and just give it further details. So it's not just this flat emissive. And let's see where we can add some more of these dots. I actually think we have enough. Let's duplicate this layer of the emissive and let's call it optional lines, because we can always toggle this. Let's just click into the mask and say add black mask. So we override the one that we already had before, the small dots. And that way we start all fresh here. I'm gonna put the brush size down to the smallest, 0.1. And now back here to the front of the sword, I'm gonna enable our lazy mouse, or put it a bit higher here. And then let me try to get this right here. With the lazy mouse we can follow this curve, and then pressing shift we can make a connecting line here. Let's take it over here. So let's carry on here with that line, take it up here. And let's fill in these blanks that we have there. And then let's just zoom out a bit so that we can cover more ground here with our line connection. And that will look really nice to have this emissive there. And like I was saying, the emissive is always optional. If you don't want to have it with the emissive, you can just disable that layer when you export the textures later on. But on this science fiction / fantasy kind of a weapon, it sure makes sense to have some extra emissive on it to give it this cool look when you see it in the dark. So let's bring that over here with a bit of a curve, and then let's connect it here into that ram skull. Let's take it up here. So let's take it here into the REM skull and let's just pretty much take it where we have these edges already. We don't just want to paint it randomly here on these surfaces, but we want to just pretty much support the normal map information that we already have, which will of course also add to give the whole thing more contrast here, such as here on that nose. So having these lines going through there will automatically give the eye something to look at and to notice, and will then also make you more aware of the other small details that we have there. So this will then add to the overall composition and makes it a cool feature. So let's also take it here from the side. Let's take a look at it. And I'm just gonna connect it here. Let me just do that again. We didn't have a normal map detail there, but let's just paint one in. That's also why we have the height information, so that it looks like it was actually carved into that metal. And it's not just this flat line that's on top of it like a sticker. That's why it's good to work with that height information. And let's take it also here further along these islands. And let's make sure the curves look nice, that we don't have any zigzagging steps in there. And in that case, the lazy mouse is our friend. Let's also connect this here. And then we're gonna close it here. And I want to go back here to our gold and make sure that we have these pixelation there dealt with, so that everything is solid gold there. And let's see where else we could add some of that emissive. Let's go back to the lines, the mask of the lines. And let's also add something here to that sphere that we have here in the back. And let's make it so that it kind of frames this metal here. Let me undo this and take it around here. So that way we have a separation there with the dark material and the metal. And then we're gonna connect it down here. And let's just see if I want to close it off there or have a different connection. Let's make it so that this goes into that element. And then we have this emissive here going along the side of this center piece that we have there. And that way we give that whole thing a little bit of a interesting story, that it's somehow connected as some sort of a energy piece, battery, could be really anything. But when we do textures, it's always nice to kind of think of it as if we want to tell a bit of a story. So for example here, I want to emphasize this arch that we have there. Let me just put up the distance here. Let's have it at 2.5 and then follow this curve here. And let's just connect it then down here. And that way we have this nice division there to make it a bit more interesting. So as the next thing, I actually want to go back here to our gold material and add a bit more gold to it here on these sides. So let's go down here to our gold folder, select the mask, and then let's just zoom in. And let's add some more gold here to this wing part, where right now I feel like it just doesn't have enough of it. We did add quite a bit of it here at the sides of it, but now we come in here with more of a thinner line to add a bit more of a division there with this dark material, and then next to it we have the metal, and that will just make it also look more interesting. This workflow that you're seeing here in the texturing tutorial is also one-to-one the same that I use when I work on Warframe. And if you are a Warframe player, then you will know that you can tint your own colors in the game. And that is in general 4 colors plus 1 emissive color. So that's exactly the same setup that we have here. And I find that this is something that not only did I get very used to it, but also if this here is not meant to be a Warframe weapon, it still works very well. To have these 4 materials means that we're not gonna overload the sword with a ton of different materials, but we just have enough to make a lot of interesting contrast, but without sacrificing the overall silhouette. And also, like I was just saying, we're not gonna overload it and exaggerate it by throwing a whole ton of different materials here on it. And that is a workflow that I really like, to have these 4 colors. And I think that is also something that I like to do even if it's not for Warframe. Of course, it depends what kind of object you're working on. You might need more than 4 colors or 4 materials. But in general, for something like that here, that works very well. Let's also make this here golden, just so that people actually see that there are these details. This will help it. Let's also fill that up here. And of course, what I was just mentioning here with these 4 materials plus the emissive color, that is something that is working excellent for Warframe. That doesn't mean that it has to be applied to everything that you have in mind when it comes to creating something. It depends on the game that you're working on, and of course also what it is that you're working on. Let's say you work on a car, then you probably need more than just 4 materials. You have the glass, you have the rubber, you have the chrome, you have leather seats, you have all sorts of materials. So this cannot always be applied to every case. But here on that sword, it works very well. And the mace tutorial, which I hope you will also watch, or maybe you already watched it because it's not as in-depth and doesn't go as long as the sword tutorial, also makes use of these 4 colors or 4 materials. So let's go back here to our emissive lines and let's add some more of that, especially here on these wing parts. So let's carry on here. The lazy mouse is very useful here in that case. I'm gonna take it through this element, this tiny detail, and then connect it here to the top. Well, to the top as seen from the other side. And actually I'm gonna undo that and paint it here from that side, which I find is a bit easier from left to right, at least for me. And I'm gonna fill this element here with emissive, have a bit of a bigger brush, and this element here I also want to fill it. So now these wings, I quite like how they look like now. They have quite a lot of interesting material divisions, and also the emissive looks like it's good in place there. And now let's go back here to this sphere, which so far has only these two emissive dots, the big ones. And I think that will also look good to give it some of these extra lines here. Let's take it here and then connect it here to the upper region. Find a different camera angle and then continue here from the top. And then also here at the back of it, let's also make a connection here. I'm going to use the Shift key. And now we just got to do the same thing here at the bottom. So I'm going to just repeat this. And then here at the bottom side, do the same thing as we did there on the top. Don't need to be always in the top view. Can also just connect it like that here from the side view. And here the same thing. And that makes that sphere also look a bit more interesting. I want to add some extra lines here on these parts. And let's just see here from the front of it. I'm actually going to undo that and put it here on that line. And that way we can then connect it like this here, where before it wasn't as good of a normal map information there for us to place that emissive. And this here works better. And in that case, we also have the symmetry on the other side, so we don't have to repeat it there. So that looks pretty good. What I want to do is go back here to this small dot material and also add a bit of emissive here on these. So now we already did a lot of work here on our texture. Mainly we were doing the masking and the emissive, and we did the leather material already. So now it would be time to take a look here at our gold, and let's swap it out with an actual gold smart material, which means that it already comes with some wear and tear built into it. I'm going to filter for gold here under the smart material tab and then just drag it here into that gold folder. If we open that folder, it comes with surface details, some AO dirt and other things. And I want to go over here to the base metal and go in the roughness view. And I want it to be more glossy. So you can see how it turns black here in the roughness view. That means it's more glossy. And that is what I want to have here on this gold. I want it to be more shiny. The actual color, I actually don't want to be so saturated. So I'm gonna take our saturation slider here and bring it down to 616. And then let's also change our brightness a bit here. Let's have it here at 0.639. I think that looks very good. It's not the out-of-the-box gold material that Substance Painter shipped with, but we can customize it to how we prefer it. And now let's go back here to our glow, and I want to switch it to white. That way, if we import it to Marmoset later on, it has a neutral color that we can change in Marmoset or in the game engine of your choice. As the next thing, we're going to make a rune stamp. We're gonna hover over here to our alpha tab, and we wanna load in that PNG with our runes on it. I made that in Photoshop, and if you translate it, you will see that it reads chamfer zone. And I'm gonna say current session and switch it to alpha so that it lands here in that alpha tab. So select this one here. And then we're gonna go over to our gold folder and press Ctrl D on it to have a copy of it. So now I'm gonna call this folder here color for runes, and then I'm gonna go on our mask and say create black mask so that it's overwritten and we have nothing in that mask so far. Now this here behaves like a regular brush, so we're just gonna crank that up here to have that size. I'm gonna turn off the symmetry, or otherwise it gets confused. In that case, we don't want to have symmetry. And then I'm gonna position it here like that and stamp down. And this will give us here some nice runes that we have in the sword. I'm just gonna undo it and position it a bit further down so that it's not so squeezed on the top. So this is how you can do something like that. Just create a black square texture in Photoshop and add any white details and save it out and import it to Substance Painter. I'm gonna use our height information here. I'm gonna put it to minus 0.1, something like that, so that not only do we have this stamp here, but it actually looks like it's been stamped in there properly, forged into that metal. So now let's take a look here at our color-free random, which so far is this perfectly pristine looking material. And I'm gonna select this material and press Ctrl G. That will create a subfolder within our folder. And now I'm gonna create a black mask and add a generator on it. And I wanna have the metal edgeware. So you can see how now it picks up from the metal that's underneath it, because our color-free random is on top of the metal. And now we are able to use this metal edgeware generator here to, like the name suggests, generate this edgeware. And we have our wear level slider, all sorts of different sliders that will affect it. Here we have our grunge amount. Take a look at the horn and see how it changes if we crank it all the way up. I prefer to have this here to a subtle amount on that particular case. And the grunge scale, I'm gonna leave it here at 2. So here's something that I don't like at the moment. It is that this all looks very soft. So what I'm gonna do is right click our mask and I wanna add a fill layer. So let's add a fill layer here to our mask, go down here to grayscale, and let's filter for grunge. And that allows us to add a custom texture. I'm gonna add the grunge charcoal, and let's put that to divide on our layer mode here. And then we have a secondary texture that we can play with here to affect this grunge. And I'm just gonna use our balance slider here, have it at 0.11 to not have it so generic looking as it was before. So in general, if you toggle it, you can see the difference here. And this will just make it look a bit more interesting and not as static as it was. And let's just check also the other parts where we have this. And overall, I don't want to go too strong here on that edgeware, but you can see how we have individual wear and tear now on these horns with this edgeware that we don't have on the other parts. And that makes for a nice contrast with our materials. I'm gonna add a new folder here on top of our emissive folder, and I'm just gonna call it scratches. Let's copy the mask from our leather folder, and then let's create a new black mask and then paste the leather mask into this one. And then we're going to invert that mask, which will add this levels modifier to it. This is the inversion. Now we're gonna add a fill layer here into it. And basically what that means is that everything gets affected aside from our leather. So on this fill layer, let's disable all channels aside from roughness and height information. You can see that if we slide that here all the way to 1, we have no reflection left here. Everything gets overwritten. And now I'm gonna add a black mask here onto that fill layer and add a fill to the black mask. Click on that grayscale tab and then filter for scratches. And let's see which one we want to add here. There are 2 generators here, the grunge scratch generator as well as the other one, and I actually want to have this one here. Grunge scratch is rough. They are very similar, and essentially what they let us do is add some extra scratches here to our metal. That's why I was masking out the leather earlier. And now we can use our height information here, of course, to give it a bit of a height. So let's see what we want to put it at. And I want to have it quite low, 0.01. And that way we don't have it too much interfering here with our normal map, but still enough to give it a bit of a depth. And you can see that this scratch generator here comes with a whole bunch of settings. I'm gonna toggle it here to our roughness mode, cycle it further, and then you get to the mask mode. Right now you see this is our actual mask. And let's just use the scratch length slider here to bring that down a bit, 0.69. And let's see what else we can do here. The dust intensity, I want to also lower the amount so that we don't have so much noise on there. Let's see it here at the top. And overall, you can see how this added here to our wear and tear and doesn't make it look like it's such a super pristine sword. It looks like it has seen some battle already. And I'm going to switch back here to our masking view. And if you click that seed button, you can regenerate where these scratches are appearing. And I'm just gonna click it a few times until I'm happy here. I think this one looks good here. So we have some on the skull and we have a fair amount here at the blade. And this one I think looks better than the original one. So sometimes it's just a matter of clicking on that seed button. So let's take another look here, what we can still do. I want to give this here also a proper name so that it's not so confusing. This one is the long scratches, and now I'm going to duplicate that layer and call it small scratches. And let's just disable the long scratches layer, go into this generator, and let's bring the balance down quite a bit here. And also I'm gonna use our scratch tiling here and tile it up to, let's put it to 3, and then let's put the balance further down. That way we have a little bit of these smaller scratches, and that helps to give it some extra contrast here. If we toggle it, you can see it appearing here on the ram skull. Let's also zoom in here. It's barely visible here on that wing part, so I'm just gonna increase the tiling to 4. That way we also see it here. And even though it looks here in that masking view as if it's on the leather, it's actually masked out on the leather. We don't have to worry. So let's put the balance further down here, and let's put our scratch width also a little bit further down. And now we have some nice tiny scratches here. And then we can put also back on our original layer here with the bigger scratches. And that would be some extra wear and tear that we now added here to our metal parts. Let me just make that a little bigger here so we see all our layers. What I want to do next is create another folder here on top of our scratches folder, and I'm gonna call this one wear and tear. And in that wear and tear folder, I'm gonna add a layer that I'm gonna call dust. So this one is another fill layer, and let's put it to some darker gray tone here. We don't need to have any color in it. Let's just have it at a dark gray. And now on this fill layer, let's add a black mask. And then onto our mask, let's add the dirt generator here. And we have to be careful because the material where we have this generator applied to, our dust material, is at the moment working on all the channels. That means we really have a big impact here. You can see how it really changes the look dramatically if we toggle it on and off. And you can then also go into our channel views here and see how it affects, for example, our metal here. So let's toggle this before and after. And we don't want to have it as extreme as it is right now. So what we want to do is go over here and change, for example, the roughness on our main material and make it a little bit more glossy, essentially. I'm gonna have it here at 0.24. And now let's go back here to our generator settings of that dirt. And let's also do some tweaking here, because right now it's overall too much. So I'm gonna have our dirt level here at 0.65, and I want to bring up that contrast to 0.7. Let's leave it here. So let's take a look here at our grunge scale. And right now I'm actually not seeing much of a difference. That's probably because our dirt is very contrasty. But you can see if we go over here to our different channels, such as the metallic channel, and we move that grunge scale, that it does make a difference. And I prefer to have the grunge scale here at a lower setting, which means it's generally bigger, the individual grunge flakes. And that is mostly better than having these super tiny details that look more noisy. That's why I prefer to have these bigger grunge scales. So on this dust material, let's disable the emissive. That means that our actual emissive channel doesn't get overwritten here by that dust. And that is something that we don't want. We don't want that dust to affect the emissive. However, there is something that I want to do, which is go over here to our optional lines. And I just changed my mind here on this detail. So I'm just gonna mask this and change it. And I actually want to have our symmetry on for that as well, so that we affect both sides here at the same time. And I'm gonna have this here laid out a bit differently. So let's go back here to our top perspective. And then I'm just gonna find a good angle here from the top and start painting it like this here. I think that was a bit too much before, where we had it sort of framed there into this center piece, or around it more like. And now it's a bit more simple and doesn't have so much clutter there, which I think suits it better. However, there is another thing that I want to do here on these optional lines. I want to add a paint layer here onto our mask. And so far I'm not actually painting anything. I will let you know in a moment. Let's put it to black, this brush, and put our stroke opacity down to, let's have it at 70. And now let's just press once onto this selection here. Now I clicked it down, And let me go over here to our channel view on that mask. And I'm just gonna click down once more and another time here. And here also, let's just press down and have a bit of this gradient basically. That's what I want. I want these lines here to be more like gradients. I'm gonna put the stroke opacity even further down here to 20 and just press down a few more times here. I mean, you don't have to follow every single click that I do, but most importantly, you see what we're up to here. We want to make sure we have this gradient kind of a look. And that's gonna make it look really nice once we are in our Marmoset render software after this tutorial ends here. And also, if you put it in a game, it will not just be one bold emissive line, but you actually have a bit of this gradient here. I'm gonna leave it like it is on the actual blade part. This was just here some finishing touches on the centerpiece. And also now that I zoom in here on that leather, I see that the dust is affecting it, and the dust was a little bit glossy. So what I want to do is grab that dust layer, and I'm just gonna put it here into our scratches folder, which already had a mask for that leather. And then I'm gonna delete that folder that we had on top and just call this one here wear and tear without leather, so that it's really clear what we're doing. And now that I'm looking at our leather here in the roughness channel, I want to go into that leather fine aged folder, and here on our dust material I want to put the roughness to 0.78 to give it a bit more gloss. And here on the leather color material I'm gonna also have it at 0.42, and that way we have it a bit more glossy here. And if you look at your leather belt, it sometimes tends to have a little bit of this gloss, even if it's a natural leather. There's one thing I noticed on our runes. If you go over here to where we have them, they are quite dirty, and I actually rather have them stand out more. So I'm gonna take this rune folder that we created earlier, and I'm gonna put it over our wear and tear folder. And that already fixes this problem. And now I'm gonna make an alternate glow version. We still have a fill layer in here. If you don't have it, then just create a new fill layer, put it on top of our gold armor, and this one I'm gonna give it a proper name here, and I'm gonna call it alternate glow version. And essentially I'm gonna disable everything here aside from the emissive, and then I'm gonna give the emissive also a white color here, which means it's color neutral, and we can change it in the editor or the game engine. Let's go back to these two layers. That here was the curvature map. I'm just gonna give it a proper name so that it's not confusing. I should have done that in the beginning. So as a last thing, let's create a layer, not a fill layer this time. Let's right click it and say add filter. Click on filter, and then we're gonna search for sharpen. So let's select this, and now you can see that it's not doing anything, and that's because we have to put it here to pass through. And now you can see how we can sharpen the whole thing here. This is basically like being in Photoshop and also adding a sharpen layer. But I don't want to have it so strong, otherwise it looks too noisy in some parts. So I'm going to have it here at 0.19, maybe lower it a bit more, 0.15. And you can see how this adds a little bit of extra contrast, obviously. I'm going to go over here to our color-free random, the original material here, and I'm gonna add a little bit of height information here to this. So I'm gonna have it at, let me just type it, 0.01, and this way we have a little bit of depth there where this paint was kind of chipping off, and that's also gonna add a nice touch here at the end. those are the finishing touches. And now all that's left to do is go over here to export. And this is where we have our texture maps, and here you can select everything: Unreal, CryEngine, Unity. But in that case, we're gonna leave it as document channels. I already have the right folder here, and essentially it's in our Sword folder, and then I call it Marmo. I'm using PNG and a 4K resolution here. And that means we are done with the texturing tutorial. I hope you liked it. And next we're gonna make some really nice renders in Marmoset. See you there.